Hello there. After Boris Johnson's resignation, the candidates who will determine the successor among themselves have been identified. Both were already part of Johnson's cabinet. Oh boy. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's successor will be ex-Finance Minister Rishi Sunak or Foreign Secretary Liz Truss. The two politicians received the most votes in the vote in the Conservative Parliamentary Group on Wednesday, as the head of the responsible committee, Graham Brady, announced, and you might have seen in my video on Thursday. Secretary of Commerce Penny Mordaunt received the fewest votes, dropping 8 votes less than Truss. Now the members of the Tory party decide in a runoff. On September 5th, a decision will be made as to who will succeed Johnson in Downing Street. The vote had become necessary because incumbent Johnson had resigned as party leader 2 weeks ago under massive pressure from a parliamentary group, even without saying the word resignation. But most MPs voted for Sunak in all voting rounds in the parliamentary group. However, Sunak, who also appeals to the centre of the party, is controversial internally. Above all, the right-wing conservative wing around Truss accuses Sunak of being responsible for the largest tax increases in recent decades. Former Goldman Sachs banker Sunak has long been considered the favorite to succeed Johnson. He earned merits in the corona pandemic with a rescue program for the economy. However, given the skyrocketing cost of living, many Britons felt his ministry's support was too low and the taxes too high. Like Johnson, he was fined for violating lockdown requirements. The incumbent Prime Minister Johnson is also considered an opponent of his. Those around him have accused the former Chancellor of the Exchequer of having betrayed the head of government by instigating Johnson's downfall with his resignation. Sunak rejects this. The result of a survey by the polling institute YouGov among Tory party members on Tuesday also brought him bad news. Accordingly, he should lose in the runoff, and the next YouGov poll was even worse for him. Truss is considered the darling of the Conservative base. In Johnson's government, she was Foreign Secretary for 2 years before the staunch Brexit supporter was appointed for Foreign Secretary. Since last year, she also has represented British positions as chief negotiator in Brussels at the EU. Truss carefully cultivates her public image. Last year, she had herself photographed in a tank, which is reminiscent of a well-known picture of Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. Shortly before Johnson's resignation, she promised him her full support. Shortly thereafter, she declared that Johnson made the right decision in leaving under this pressure. In the early rounds of the election, Truss always came in third place, behind former Foreign Aid and Defence Secretary Mordaunt, who had long been considered the darling of the party base. She had made a name for herself as a vehement advocate of Brexit. Nonetheless, Mordaunt was a thorn in the side of the Tories on the far right, who accused her of overly liberal views on gender issues and a lack of cabinet experience. As the only remaining representative of the right wing, Truss was apparently able to convince many MPs who had previously voted for the right-wing Conservative former State Secretary Kemi Badenoch, as I predicted in my video the day before the vote. Now the party members have the floor. However, it's unclear how many there are at the moment. In the previous election of the party leader in 2019, when Boris Johnson prevailed, there were around 160,000 members. At the beginning of next week, the BBC wants to broadcast a TV duel between the last two candidates, to which the applicants have already agreed. Great Britain gets a new Prime Minister on September 5th, as I said, and it is now clear it will either be the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, who resigned only a few days ago, or the current Foreign Minister Liz Truss. And people say now around 170,000 members of the party will vote on them, but the numbers. A new election will not take place, though, a general election. Sunak and former Health Minister Sajid Javid triggered a government crisis with their resignation on July 5th, in which Johnson was also forced to resign. The Conservative Party still retains the electoral mandate from the last general election, since it was the party that was elected and not Johnson, although he claimed something different all the time. Johnson will remain in office on a provisional basis until the handover of office by Queen Elizabeth II. He said goodbye to standing Tory applause after his final appearance on Prime Minister's Questions, the PMQs, in the House of Commons on Wednesday, and he left with the words, "Hasta la vista, baby." This was a reference to the movie Terminator 2 starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. And by the way, in German, at the end of the video, I did what you asked me to. The translation, "see you again," is it, by the way. In fact, there are nearly 2,000 party members who have petitioned for Johnson to be included in the party's vote as his own successor. But it will probably stay with a race between Sunak and Truss. Sunak got the most support from Tory MPs in Wednesday's parliamentary vote with 137 out of the 357 votes. Truss followed with 113 votes, and Penny Mordaunt, who was eliminated, with 105 votes. The former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Sunak, is, as I said, less popular with the party members than Truss, and that's not only according to YouGov, but also to a Conservative home poll. He is viewed as a traitor by many of Johnson's supporters. And despite all the scandals, the Truss remained loyal to Johnson, and Sunak almost as long. First as State Secretary in the Ministry of Finance, and since 2020 as Chancellor of the Exchequer. He himself was fined, as I said, and his resignation on July 5th was indeed crucial for the change of mood. But that only came at a moment when the end of Johnson became apparent with the resignation of Health Secretary Javid. And Sunak was ready to launch his long-prepared campaign to become Prime Minister himself. And that's what they blame him for, prepared since December. But Sunak is ambitious. He's the child of an Indian immigrant family, his father a doctor and his mother a pharmacist. Both immigrated from Kenya and Tanzania in the 1960s. The son made it to the elite school in Winchester and from there to Oxford, where he studied philosophy, politics and history. While attending Stanford, he met his wife, Akshata Murthy, daughter of Indian entrepreneur and billionaire N.R. Narayana Murthy. In India, he had worked his way up from a small programmer to the owner of the IT group Infosys. Sunak, his wife and children spent a lot of time in California. Until last year, he had a green card that allowed him to pay tax on his worldwide income in the United States. And this information was apparently leaked by the Johnson camp to the media to harm Sunak. Before his political career, the eloquent Indian worked at Goldman Sachs and then switched to the hedge fund, the Children's Investment Fund, or TCI, by Chris Hone. He and his wife are among the richest people in Britain, with an estimated fortune of £630 million, according to the Times newspaper. Murthy, Sunak's wife, was also criticized because she also did not pay tax on her income in Great Britain with a so-called non-domicile status. The wealth allowed Sunak to enter politics in 2015 with an almost certain MP seat in Richmond in Yorkshire. Sunak has behind him the voices in the faction that want a prime minister with technical skills and an eye for detail. But he's not the darling of the party's far right. That is Liz Truss. Sunak emphasized during his campaign that he was not demonizing Johnson, but he advocates more sensible fiscal policies. Sunak insists on cutting taxes, which are at their highest level in 40 years, only after the country weathers inflation. He defends the increase in social security contributions to fund massive spending on health and nursing services. He has also planned an increase in corporate income tax from 19 to 25%. He also justifies this by saying that he massively helped the economy during the corona pandemic with short-time work benefits. However, he also wants to keep controversial political programs such as the deportation of refugees to Rwanda and the planned Northern Ireland Act, which would break the Northern Ireland Protocol with the EU. He is a staunch Brexit supporter. All this does not go far enough for the parliamentary group and possibly also for many party members. Especially since Sunak is seen as a traitor and kingslayer by Johnson. Jamie Lannister? The political right of the faction had therefore brought its candidate Secretary of State Liz Truss into play in the race to succeed Johnson. She seems more reserved than the eloquent and well-versed Sunak, is still unsure in front of the cameras and clings to her speech texts. She herself has not resigned and justified it by saying that she is loyal. She has the Johnson supporters united behind her and is backed by the group of Brexit hardliners in the group. Of course, you all know, the European Research Group, the ERG, as well as Johnson's MPs Jacob Rees-Mogg and Nadine Dorries, who are almost blindly following. She has more party members behind her than her competitor Sunak. The mother of two daughters comes from a family in the north of the country. The father is a professor of mathematics at the University of Leeds, and the mother is a nurse, teacher, and nuclear power activist, both leaning towards Labour. Despite claims to the contrary, Truss attended good schools and studied politics, philosophy, and economics at Oxford. She was president of the Liberal Democrats at university, so Sunak asked her on one of the televised debates of the day, actually, which is more embarrassing for you? That you were a liberal or that you voted for Britain to stay in the EU? In fact, it wasn't until 1996 that Truss switched to the Conservative Party. She was brought into government by former Prime Minister David Cameron and thus followed his Remain campaign in 2016. She later switched sides, holding positions in different government departments under Prime Minister Theresa May and eventually Boris Johnson. She has been Foreign Minister since September 15th. The politicians say what the right-wingers want to hear in their parliamentary group and party. This also earned the backing of the right-wing press, above all the tabloids Daily Mail and Daily Telegraph. She imitates her idol in the party, and that's Margaret Thatcher, or she claims to do so. She went so far as to have herself photographed in a pose in a tank, as I said, in Estonia, that Thatcher once struck. For the television debate, she wore a white blouse with a large white bow in a dark suit, very much in the style of Thatcher. She demonstratively represents the neoliberal side of the Conservative Party, so she preaches the small state and presented the most comprehensive program of tax cuts of all candidates in the current campaign. Sunak said she promises free gifts to the public even though her policies are unfundable. She countered that Sunak's tax hikes were driving the country into recession. The arguments between the two eventually became so hostile in front of the cameras that the next debate was scrapped. And that's the fun, that now they will meet again on Monday evening in a public discussion on BBC. Truss insists that she will deliver, as she always has done in her career in politics, for example, with the tens of trade agreements that she concluded with other countries after Brexit, and with a planned Northern Ireland law that could finally break the EU's blockade on Northern Ireland. The trade deals is bollocks, by the way. It was just one new one. It will deliver what the Conservatives promised in 2019, most notably deregulation, Brexit, and higher military spending, which is expected to reach 3% of GDP by the end of the decade. In the more liberal media, and especially on Twitter, examples are repeatedly given of how clueless and ill-prepared she is at meetings. For example, with the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, with whom she allegedly did not even know exactly where the line between or the border between Ukraine and Russia was. I talked about this in the video months ago when it happened. But she promises what many Tories understand by true blue conservative politics. She wants to reverse the increase in social security contributions, cancel the planned corporate tax hike, suspend the green tax, and stick to the tough refugee policy of Rwanda deportations. However, both candidates do not show humility and self-criticism. The fact that the Conservative Party has now toppled 3 prime ministers after Cameron, May, and Johnson within 12 years, and is now expecting the country to try a 4th, is not an issue for either of them. Neither candidate has felt it necessary to reassure the country that, following Johnson's policy, Britain will once again abide by international treaties, that the government will once again respect laws and conventions, will not undermine the House of Commons, will not attack judges and freedom of expression media, and I don't know what else. So far, no candidate has distanced themselves from the corruption in the Johnson administration, from the party's politically influential donors, and from the cronyism of the Tories. So far, no one has seemed to mind that just 170,000 Conservatives are electing a prime minister for a country whose population of 67 million people has no say in the matter, although a lot of what we hear in this campaign has nothing to do with the manifesto the people voted on. So, democratic is different. I'll see you in my next video. Ich komme wieder.